Is everybody there? Yeah, okay. Buenos días. Bienvenidos a esta segunda versión de webinar del SNI. Vamos a dar unos minutos para que se conecten algunos otros colegas. Así que vamos a esperar unos 4 o 5 minutos y luego arrancamos.
Okay.
I only see 6.
Yeah, I see. We start a little later than usual, than the actual time.
Yeah, but there were only 4 before, so I don't know.
Yeah.
People are registering slow.
Okay.
We had about 60 people registered.
Okay.
See, it says my signal is slow a little bit. Anyway.
My signal too, Omar.
Okay, that issues with the internet here in Senegal. Very few people.
That's not good.
No. Definitely not. We are losing people.
I see that.
It's so bad.
Although I see one more person registered, so.
Rosa, ¿me puedes mandar el enlace de los participantes por correo, porfa? Me están pidiendo el enlace por Facebook.
Voy.
Gracias.
Okay, 10.
You know, Omar, I noticed that you didn't have a time change yet.
What do you mean a time change?
Panama hasn't changed the time.
No, we don't change the time.
You don't change at all?
No, not at all.
Ah, okay. Yeah, because they changed the time last Sunday here. So we're actually 7 hours different now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Good. No, we don't. I think the maximum difference between the darkest day or the shortest day and the longest day is about 36 minutes, something like that.
I see. So it's not worthwhile.
No, it does make a big difference because in July we have sunset coming over at 7 p.m. And in December it comes close to 6.
Yeah.
It start getting dark. So okay, let's see. We have 11 participants. I am sending this to a lot of researchers
Okay.
right now. All right. I think this is below what we expected because we getting registrations and then we see like a drop in 40% from registration to participation. So
yeah, Omar. I mean, you be the judge if we should get started or not, because I think we shouldn't leave everybody,
Yeah, I think we should start, and then let me introduce you. So, buenos días a todos. Le damos la bienvenida a este webinar sobre la evaluación y la evaluación en ciencia, en investigación y qué puede traernos la evaluación. Tenemos un invitado muy especial, el doctor Markus Dettenhofer. Él nos acompaña desde Austria y nos va a estar brindando pues, su experiencia como director o exdirector del Centro Europeo, el Instituto de Tecnología de Europa Central, CEITEC, y el CEITEC representa un consorcio de 6 universidades e institutos de investigación en Brno, en República Checa, y él estuvo a cargo de manejar cerca de 550 investigadores y ha trabajado en los campos de las ciencias de la vida, de materiales y tecnología. Y antes de llegar al CEITEC en la República Checa, el doctor Dettenhofer fue el líder de proyectos del desarrollo clínico o el desarrollo clínico de vacunas virales y de anticuerpos en Crucell, que fue luego adquirida por Johnson & Johnson. También trabajó en la Escuela de Medicina de Harvard y en los campos de genética y de desarrollo en biología, ¿no? Como quien dice, la gran ambición del doctor Dettenhofer ha sido tratar de llevar la ciencia para un bien común, ¿verdad? Y para que las sociedades también obtengan un mejor desarrollo. Sus trabajos más recientes son sobre gobernanza y prácticas de gobernanza en la educación superior y en instituciones de educación superior, y es también un científico visitante de la Unión Europea en investigación. Recibió su doctorado en el Johns Hopkins University y tiene un bachiller en ciencias de la Universidad de California en Berkeley. Yo lo voy a dejar hasta aquí. And I welcome Dr. Marcus and appreciate and thank him for having the opportunity to speak to us and share with us his experience. And we do this in terms of promoting a new vision for this national research system as we move into a new phase for the national research system, as we are going to promote the recognition of research centers and research groups in the future. So we are preparing a roadmap for such program. And we would like you guys to learn about what entails to become a research center and a national research group with the impact and importance that you should take this endeavor for recognition at the world level. So without more, I let Marcus introduce himself a little bit more extensively and let us about his experience about research evaluation in Europe. Welcome.
Okay, thank you, Omar. Thank you for the absolutely generous introduction. Very kind, and I really look forward to this this small seminar workshop. I'd like to keep this as interactive as possible, and I know that by video conference it's sometimes challenging, but I've started the chat on the chat list to encourage questions, and I think that if we can also get to, let's say, video and look at people, maybe it's at the end, that would be great. But please don't let's say, don't hesitate to interrupt me. I think it's, it goes without saying. I think if you have questions, I will try to address this. And I think in that spirit, since today we're talking about evaluations, I want to encourage also that interactiveness, because sometimes people look at evaluations as something maybe scary and maybe something we don't want to do. And I'll emphasize this through my talk, is that the evaluation, as is with science, it's by your peers, your colleagues. And these people, they want you to do well. And so today I'll tell you a little bit about, let's say, how I look at, let's say, the philosophy of doing science that will bring impact, and then also talk a little bit about an example of an evaluation. But that being said, the evaluation and the process for Panama, as for any country, is unique, and it has to be contextualized to where you're located and to best fit your goals. So the goals that happen in Czech Republic or in China or whatever that's theirs. But you are setting your own goals and where you want to go. And the researchers are part of, they are the research community itself. And so you will decide where you would like to go, how you would like to improve. And so it's really a process that you're engaged with. And so, let's see. Okay, this goes with next. Okay, here we go. Right. So let's talk about research goals. And so I love this little cartoon because it highlights the typical progression of thinking of a lot of scientists. And so, you'll remember when you were a graduate student, for many of you, you said, I just want to do whatever science I can do, whatever kind of research I'm going to do, I'm just going to do it. And then as you go through it, you become a graduate student and your professor tells you what to do. Basically, you're under pressure. And then you start getting on this track of being an assistant professor and tenured professor. And there's always someone or some group that is influencing your goals, in essence. And that's a reality. But one of the things is that we cherish academic freedom. We cherish this because academic freedom and freedom of thinking and creative thinking is really why, I think, at the heart of why a lot of us got into doing research itself, is to discover something new. But, the funny part of the cartoonism, unfortunately, there are pressures, there's outside pressures to perform and do things. But this is part of the life, so to speak. So evaluation. Essentially, it's a process to assess the achievement of your goals, and it's basically looking at and helping you to get to the point of achieving those goals. But from that statement, there's two questions that come to mind. You might ask, what are the goals of your research? What are your goals? And then secondly, how can I show others that I'm achieving those goals? Because you might say, well, I'm achieving them. I don't need any kind of, let's say, interference in this. But on the other hand, you have to show this. And I think part of showing this is also an advantage, because it promotes your science, your research. It also allows you to have feedback from others so that you can get better. And I think that we go into it with this sort of mindset, and the evaluation will help you improve, because it'll sharpen the way you think about these goals, and help you go forward and enlighten you, show you new things. Now, I'll talk a little bit about the research. So what is it? I mean, in essence, research is discovering, describing, predicting, understanding something new. I think in all fields, we may have people in the audience from natural sciences to social sciences, physics, and whatnot. But in the end, it does mean uncovering something new, finding a new solution. And the method that we use to sort of justify it at the what level is, we all know this, we're writing publications, we're writing grants, and going to conferences, and many, many, many other things. But that's not all we do. We also train people. We collaborate. There's a humanness to this, an interactiveness. But I'll say again, we need to promote the work, the dissemination of this, because it raises awareness of what you do, why it's important, and also the idea of citations. Now, to how do we do research? And I'm lifting this from the previous week's speaker. So Enrique from University of Granada, he talked about publishing high, reading, learning from others, attending a lot of talks, also going and looking around, going to different research centers, knowing what they do because it gives you ideas, inviting people to come because they will collaborate with you. The sort of social contact that you have with people will enable you to also broaden your outlook and your research. And also he mentioned identifying emerging topics. And this is important. I'll talk about this a little bit later, about why it's not always healthy to stay fixed on the same type of research that you've been doing as a graduate student through your entire career. Now, I mentioned the what and the how, but if we look at this paradigm, which this is called the golden circle, this is not something that I've come up with. This has been popularized by many, many other people. It's sort of an old idea, but at the core of a lot of this is why. Why is the biggest question, the most important question. It's the purpose or mission for why you do your research. It's also the way that you explain to others in different fields what you're doing. What is your key question? I remember maybe as a graduate student, people said, you have to be able to explain your research to your grandmother. And why is that? Because you can gain common ground in this. And it's not just your grandmother, but can you explain your research to the public, to policymakers, to other colleagues in different fields? Now, if the question that you're asking is very narrow, let's say you study, and I thought of an example, which is you may be studying soil science and rhizoids in the soil. And I want to understand, you may say, my question is, I want to understand that. But you might step back and say, well, that connects well with people that understand fungus and maybe soil, but it connects maybe with botanists. But you might ask a broader question: how does this affect trees? The broader question is, how does it affect a community of trees? Does this lead to a communication between trees? And if you ask a bigger question, you might say, how is these rhizoids in the soil, how does this affect carbon sequestration? Which opens up a very big question, which then you would imagine gets a lot more people interested. You may still be studying it, but it gets more people interested in that. And then you realize, in order to answer that question, I need other types of scientists, and not just scientists. I need people that do policy. I need social scientists. I need a lot of people to help me answer that. But then you're asking a question that's really interesting, that has a potential of great impact, even though the what and the how for you may be the same, although you're expanding your collaboration network, you're expanding your mind. So this is what I would like to talk about a little bit today, just to sort of open this. I'm going to talk about the why, the how, and the what of reaching research goals. That's part one. And then part two, I'm going to do a very brief overview of an example of an evaluation, which is just what we do, but it doesn't mean it's what you do. And I'm actually really curious to hear what you think would be the measure for which you can assess the impact or how great your science can possibly be. Okay, so there's two parts to this. All right, so let's start with research goals. A research goal or goals, they should be ambitious. They should be something that is novel. If it's not novel, I would say it's not necessarily uncovering something. Well, it's not covering something new, but it may not be research per se. You have to pursue something new. Now, there's a degree to how new it is, but it has to be something that hasn't been done before. Otherwise, you would not be able to publish it in a peer-reviewed journal. And it also should have a long-term horizon. You should be thinking about your research on the scale of at least 5 years, 10 years, if not a lifetime. Because the question that I just raised about rhizoids and how they affect carbon sequestration, it may take 10 years, it may take a lifetime to answer this. But those are compelling questions. And your goals in this should be addressing how you answer these sort of questions. Now, the idea of goals also is multi-scalar. So many of you may be working as individual researchers. And so you may be executing research, you may be doing the what and the how, and creating an interactive community. Many of you also, most of you, should be in research groups, which gives you scale to answer some important questions, which allows you to also implement a vision. But also the next scale is the institution. And institutions typically drive the vision itself. But I think I know that they should also provide support for you to achieve your goals. The role for the institution is a lot of times for them to support you to be very effective. So it's an important thing to consider as well. Now, to the question that I asked, or the question that Omar asked me to talk about is what does an evaluation bring? Evaluations are a process that will help you achieve your goals. And so this is one of the take-home messages. Now, just an example of one of the missions, or the mission that we had for an institution long-term for SATEC, which I worked as executive director for the last 8 years, was that we covered the fields of life sciences, advanced materials, and technologies. And our aim as an institution was to be a high-performing European center of science. And so what you see in this mission statement is it covers the areas that we would work in, life science, material science, technologies, but it also gives you the scope at which what we would do, a high-performing research center in a European context. So that means our ambition is to get to a certain level so we could benchmark our goal against other successful, high-performing European research centers. So know that we're getting there. And so this is just an example of, say, at an institutional level. But you might ask, how do I pursue science that tests ideas, but also makes, let's say, some significant impact, something that goes beyond the science that I do? And so when we typically are testing ideas, as I said before, it's about exploring and discovering. Sometimes it's, societal analysis or community analysis for the social scientists. But the question I will focus a little bit on is this benefits and outcomes. And so the benefits and outcomes for your research could be developing technology. This is the most common one, where there's startup businesses. This is what many countries like. They like innovation. But I think the impact and the sort of societal impact that research has goes beyond just that. One of the things that's maybe not looked at so much or recognized so much is that the building of knowledge. In fact, I think one of the greatest benefits that you could have is to train a generation of researchers to be great thinkers that will go on in society and also do great things. It would be a legacy in a way that allows the society to be smart, to be thinking, to be asking questions. Some of the other things are that there's a lot of societal issues. So when I looked at many of the researchers in Panama, you're already addressing a lot of issues that are important for society, in the social sciences and whatnot, how the society, how culture works, history and whatnot, but also those that are involved in ecology and the oceans. I see an important role in informing policy. And I don't need to say this because today in Corona, during the Corona period, I mean, scientists are called on in all of the countries to help inform policy. Now, the question is whether the policymakers are listening all the time, but society does now want to hear, or they do recognize what researchers can bring. And it's important also to make that contribution to society through policy. So there's many, many different ways that you can contribute to society, which gets us to this question: what is impactful research? And so in a sort of a nutshell, sort of concentrated, is when your research changes the ideas and actions of others. And so it's not necessarily that it does something for you, but rather how what you do influences others' way of thinking and getting them to do things differently. And as I say, hopefully for good, because impact could also be bad. But I think the point of this is having some kind of a common good and getting people motivated to do things. Now, when we think about the overall world of ideas, the world of ideas covers a broad spectrum of general ideas all over the place, all over the different types of topics that you can imagine. But when you go into, let's say, deeper research and so forth, you get deep knowledge. So this is in the lower left-hand corner of the slide. And that deep knowledge causes one to be very specialized. So you go down this track of specialization in this red circle here, and a lot of times your community that you interact with is very specialized, be it, let's say, robotics or, different types of nanoscience or biology of a very specific type on an insect, entomology. And so you understand things in that sort of realm. And so you're expected then to publish and write grants, obviously be citations in your field to build up more knowledge. And the impact that it'll have would be in your field and among the students that you interact with. Now, if you look at the world with this lens and you say, of all this knowledge that exists, there's all these different specializations and deep knowledge within those red circles there. But the key to this is to be able to both zoom in to that specialized knowledge and be able to zoom out. Now, I'm saying that you don't have to jump over to another specialization and zoom in. It's very difficult. But if you can zoom out and connect with other specialists across that sort of spectrum of knowledge, that's where you will gain powerful collaborations and make an impact that goes beyond just your field. but it requires a mindset that's willing to go beyond their subspecialization and ask questions, ask the why questions that are bigger. And this can obviously influence the research and influence research of many's. It leads to an interdisciplinary solutions-based research, which gives you more citations. Also, I would beg that you engage also beyond academia and think about what your research can do for cities, for countries, for enterprises, businesses, or NGOs, and interact with them, because there's also a contribution that their knowledge can bring to broaden the discussion. And so I think this is an area that is really ripe for harnessing. When I look at the Panamanian priorities that's coming out, and some of it is also transversal. So they're asking for transversal work. And so I would also encourage or ask you to think about how you may be able to combine social science with natural science to solve some of the big transversal challenges that are present in the country of Panama. Now, so getting back to this impact on research is, if you're asking a broad and important question, and you can anticipate how the solutions to this research question can make an impact, I would ask that when you're asking that question, think about where it would have an impact. And you might say, well, it's in the knowledge generation. Yes, it's in knowledge generation. But from the slide, you can see that there's many areas, both societal and economic, as well as people themselves, where you can make an impact. And if you think about this first, then, or think about this with your question, you can also anticipate that level of making an impact, which is very powerful. Now, getting to the how of this. So you have a big, broad question. That's fantastic. And what do you need to do? How do you need to get there? You need to probably bring in new methodologies. And I'm not saying that you necessarily have to learn the new methodologies themselves. You may bring in a collaborator that brings the methodology. You may bring a student and train the student to bring in the methodologies. But that will expand your repertoire of what you can do. Collaborators will bring this too. And as well, they will bring the new knowledge. And what are the things that you can do to encourage this? So this gets back to Enrique's how. And of course, it's reading more broadly. It's attending broader, being curious in general. But some of the other things is really to increase those collaborations, interact with experts in other segments of society and business. And I think brain exchange is a big deal. And brain exchange means both coming and going. So having the brains go and having them come, having talent exchanging is really important. You know, one of the things, depending on the stage in your career, you know, as a student, obviously you can go somewhere else and bring in ideas. But even as a senior researcher, the idea of taking a sabbatical is wonderful. It's a wonderfully enriching experience, and that's something that does also bring new ideas. But also inviting people to come. Invite people to come for 3 months. Invite them for a year. Bring new knowledge, new collaborations, and new methodologies. So be open to those new ideas. Now, I said I would mention a little bit about the evolution of the academic fields. And one of the things that Enrique touched on is citations. Obviously, when you publish and your publications are cited, it's a sign that people are recognizing what you do. Now, there's an evolution to all of this, in that if we look at this curve here, the accumulation of citations in a particular field change with time. So the leaders in this are the ones that come up with the ideas first. So the first to publish, and they usually collect most of the citations over a lifetime of the field. Those that come later, they're known as adapters, and they collect somewhat fewer, but still collect some. But the followers are the ones that come late into a field and collect fewer citations. Now, the trick is to know when the field is changing, or know when the field is not as hot anymore, and to pick up new techniques, new knowledge, new collaborators to slightly shift a bit and then be ahead of the curve. And so again, this is about really seeking things out. Now, I see, thank you for the questions, Claudia. I will get to that. I will get to that at the end or at some point. So thanks for the question. I'll take more questions too. All right. So collaborations. So it's interesting. I saw this paper, and this is a paper from some time ago. But what it looks at is how collaborations are changing over time. And so in the red lines, you can see is that for at least science and engineering and social science, the single authorship is going down with time. And the green one is going up for the science and engineering and social science, which is collaboration between schools, meaning from one university to another, one institute to another. So that level of collaboration is going up worldwide with time. So multi-author collaborations in those particular fields. The other thing from this study, which was also quite interesting, was they looked at the impact advantage of collaboration. So if you look at the graph itself, you see that at the 0 point, there would be no added impact. But overall, when you look at all in all, you can see that the advantage of collaborating with someone else outside of your university or institute in another one has an increased impact. And it makes sense, because if one person is in one place and another person is in another place, well, more people are going to read the work. More people have, 2 groups, 3 groups, 4 groups have an ever bigger network of individuals. And so what this basically says is collaboration adds to that sort of level of impact. The other thing that's very interesting about this is that when you look at the tiers of the school's pairing, they've broken them off into first tier, second tier, third tier, and fourth tier. And the overall advantage of, let's say, collaborating together with top tier places means more impact. But in fact, what's also is that if 2 very, very low tier institutions collaborate, the impact, in fact, is more negative. Now, I don't know the reason for this, but I think what it tells you is try to interact with those that are better than you, those that are in a, let's say, higher ranking. And unfortunately, that's the way a lot of publishing houses look at it. They look at the affiliation. And I know this from being, in the Czech Republic for a number of years, building up an institution. Okay, so Elida, I see a question about the ranking system. Now, I'll just say a few words about ranking. So ranking is something that most look at, and there's many different ranking structures. There's a Shanghai, there's higher ed, there's many different ones, and they use different criteria for ranking. And the ranking system, obviously, since everybody's looking at it, does influence the way we think about this. Now, do I think that there's a difference between the top, let's say, top 100 institutions, or between 50 and 100? Not really. Do I think there's a difference between, the top 500 of all? Yeah, I think there's a difference. Do I think there's a difference between these bulk ranking? Yeah, I think there is. But what it also tells you is that there are certain things that the institutions can do that will enhance the output of the researchers. Now, I'm not saying that the rankings are true to an absolute form, in the sense that good research is done everywhere. I've been to many different countries. You can see really good research everywhere, but the rankings are really judging on the entire institution, the entire output of the institute, and that's influenced by a number of things, including financing, organization, resources, and PR, of course. So that being said, yeah, there's some truth to the ranking, but I think the point is to try to push for doing good science in general, to go forward. All right. So, all right, I'll look at the questions. I'll go through the slides and look at the questions in a second. So Collaborations, international collaboration. This was our for our institute, SATEC, when I came in 2012 in the early days. These are nodes of where we were interacting with different researchers from different countries. So clearly, if you're embedded in one country, Czech Republic, yeah, you probably have most of your collaborators in the country that you live in. But you can see from the density of the nodes, how big the nodes are, where we were collaborating with in the early days. Then in the last several years, what you can see is that we were collaborating much more. There's more collaborations, more countries, the densities are getting bigger. And so this is a marked improvement, and this is a way of measuring or assessing this level of change. Now, one of the other measures that is commonly looked at is publications, and in particular quartile rankings. So here you can see that the quartiles Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, I think Enrique touched on this, is that the quartiles do matter. So it's more difficult to get into publications that are higher up, or quartile 1 versus Q4. And so you can see the progression in the case of, let's say, our institute, both the output, the numbers of papers. We started with about 100, and then we went up to almost 700 annual, but also the percentage of Q1 and Q2 papers increased. So the quality was definitely improving, and this is something to look at as well. So I will mention one other thing, which I think is part of this ingredient. There was a question about funding and how tough it is, and I have to say that's a question that every researcher has. Every country, there's not enough funding. There's simply not enough funding to do it. But I think one of the key steps and important steps is to have a strategy in getting grants. So this was just an example of a strategy that we had from our institute, which encouraged the beginning of mobility and exchange. So this is the brain exchange, to recruitment, but always having grant support. But then this grant support, in essence, what it really was an internationally seeking, hunting, pre-award grant office. These were designated people that were good, that were trained to be good, to hunt and connect the researcher with the opportunity and help write the grant, help write the stuff that the researchers don't want to write, not the science part, but putting the charts together, the planning, the budgets, and all of these things. And this immensely helps the researchers. I think this was one of the key steps in allowing, I would say, in allowing us to get to where we were. But I think also for Panama, the idea, or for any country, I think this is really a key.
Pero no puedo ver los chats que estaban anteriormente.
Okay. Omar, you have a question?
Oh, I'm sorry. The system booted me out. Continue. Sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. And then the second thing that I would say, and this gets into this evaluation, was that we had independent evaluation, meaning our evaluators, none of them were from our country, the country, Czech Republic. They were all foreign. There was no conflict of interest. But they were peers. They were really good scientists, and they came and they gave feedback, constructive feedback, positive, and then also feedback how we can improve. And in the end, grades were given out. But this is a long-term process. But I think those two steps were very key for us. And so if I look at executing science, this gets more at the what. I mean, one issue is the idea of a critical mass for your research group. You know, you should develop around your strength, what you're really good at. But it's also important to think that the size of your group and the players that are in the group, meaning the students, the postdocs, whoever's in the group, it shouldn't be too big because it would be a waste of resources. But also, if it's too small, you may not be adequately addressing the question itself. Infrastructure is a big need, obviously, and I think you need the infrastructure that's necessary. And it's not just scientific equipment; it's also supplies. Sure, there's supply chain issues and price is a problem. But also access to literature is also part of this question. But creating an atmosphere of open ideas and exchange is really important. But also connecting with society and policymakers is something I think that allows for this. The second component is the institute, and I know for many researchers they don't want to think about the institute itself, but if you think about the collection of all the researchers and the research groups that could be working and collaborating together, that institutional setting can help organize conferences and workshops. And this disseminates the ideas that you produce. The website is critical. Marketing is critical. And as I mentioned, the grant office is critical. But also policies. How do you recruit people? Is there publication going on? Are they helping in connecting you with society, policymakers, or the private sector? How is the Institute facilitating you to become better at this? And so getting at this what, since we've gone through why, how, and what, I've added a few other things besides the sort of discovery and description, is that one of the things is you need to promote your work. And maybe the institution can help you, or, but you also have to do it yourself because it is your work. And social media is a clear tool to be used. TED Talks are really popular. Give those. It allows the public to see what you're doing. Local newspapers. This is also a real legitimate form and a good form to make the society aware of the science that you're doing or the research that you're doing. You may want to coordinate and found new networks. So if you have a big ambition, you may want to collectively put together a network of other researchers that are doing similar things around the world. It'll give you scale. It'll allow you or put you in place to write big grants, that are more of an international level. So those networks are important. Maybe the founding of an NGO for something that's important for society, or obviously businesses, startups, and so forth. And as I say, shape public policy, interact with policymakers, push that research is an important thing. So, all right. So I've covered the first, the why, the how, and the what. And this next part is a rather short part of the evaluation, short part of the talk, which is the evaluation. So I'll go through this, and then I'll try to address some of the rest of the questions that we have on there, and take any other kind of question. But in the meantime, I would like to ask the audience a question. You've already seen my presentation of the why, how, and the what, asking the big question and how it's important. And I would like to ask you if you know what would be most helpful to make your research more impactful. How would you increase that impact? Also, what achievements do you think that you've made are important beyond, let's say, a great publication or getting a grant? What is it that you think is an achievement that's worthy of looking at, acknowledging, that you think is important? So I'll just plant the seed of those questions for you, and then I'll just go into a little bit of an evaluation. So, all right. So research evaluations. There's perceived good and there's perceived bad. I think it comes down to how the evaluation is done and how it's really performed. And so, one of the things is that the evaluation definitely brings improvement. There's no question about it. You have peers come, they interact with you, they give you suggestions, and then you consider those suggestions, and it pushes you forward. It will also help you think about your goals, sharpen your goals in a way. Just like in this talk, we're asking you to reflect a little bit more about your goals, not so much on the what you do experimentally or doing surveys, but what that will bring, what kind of impact it will have to the outside world. So shaping those goals with a bigger question. You can also highlight past achievements. It should be motivating for you because you see the future now. You see, I'm going in this direction. I'm really keen on finding this out, answering this question. Also, having evaluators come gives external and internal credibility. So for instance, people look at the website to see who is on the board, who is evaluating, and it shows, you're connected to the rest of the world. But it also gives you credibility, because if you have good people there, then it looks good for you, because they're your advocates to push forward. They will act to promote this will act to promote your achievements, because of course you've now been able to document all these achievements, and this is something that others can use to present forward. And one of the things that may not always be mentioned, but I'll say this, is that the evaluators, they will, some of them will become your collaborators in the future, because they come and they see you, they get to know you, and with that, it broadens your net. Now, the disadvantages. It may seem formal, the evaluation. It doesn't necessarily have to be that formal and that frightening. I think it's just how it's presented and how it's perceived. One of the things is that for evaluations, there's nothing really standard about it. Evaluations are shaped by institutions and the country setting, but also influenced by the researchers. So in a way, the evaluations could be anything, but I would say it should be geared towards achieving your goals, so that you achieve those goals. There may be a perceived unfairness about it, and so this is something to address. And that, of course, could be demotivating. But I think the key takeaway for this is that these evaluators, they're your peers and your advocates. They wouldn't come to visit you if they didn't care. And so they are your advocates. Also, you have to understand that this is a long-term process. So in our institute, we had evaluations every couple of years, but we also had our advisors, our scientific advisors, show up every year for years. And you could email them, write them, ask them questions. They were there for the scientists to get advice. And so that long-term process, because this is a long process for improvement, it doesn't just happen with one evaluation. It takes a long time. All right. So getting through the evaluation process itself, yeah, I mean, this slide just shows a little bit of details, but I think what the important thing of it is that the setting of the goals is really the first part. Where do you want to go? And, in 10 years' time or 5 years' time, where do you want to be? Is it just improvement, or do you think you want to increase in rankings? Do you think the output should be a certain amount? I think setting the goal is important. And then from there, you can obviously, set the outline for this, select the evaluators that are appropriate, and so forth. Getting to the point where you have, let's say, a final report on this. Now, so I'll just sort of briefly take you through at least the evaluation process that we used to do, and some evaluations may be, just tell me how many papers you've put out and what quartile they're in. Okay, that says something, but it doesn't have an advantage for. It has an advantage for senior researchers, but not necessarily junior researchers that are just starting out, because they don't have as big of a track record, although they may have big ideas and big ambitions, but they would be at a disadvantage. And so for us, we recognized this, and we had, let's say, we put more into our evaluation than just looking at the outputs per se. And as I mentioned, our evaluators are all international. We look so that there's no conflict of interest. So they're not writing a grant with anybody. They didn't publish in the last 5 years with anyone. They're respected in their field. And we always have 3 per subject. And it's important to track the subjects of specialization that you are, and then select the evaluation experts for that, because only they know about your particular topic, how it is, your subject or your field. Somebody from another field doesn't really know the nuance of that. And so this is what we decided on. We have 7 fields, so we had 21 experts come. Also, the background material, this is the material that the researcher provides, is that we did was as follows. We asked them what their 5 biggest achievements were in the last few years. And, it could be a paper, but it doesn't have to be. It could be that they organized a fantastic conference where 400 people showed up. Or it could be that, they organized a network of NGOs that are dealing with climate change issues. Whatever it is, these are the achievements, and we put this usually on the first page. We also asked them to write a vision plan. And so this, as I said, this is the why question. Why am I doing this? What's the big question that I'm really asking here? And this, basically, when you read it, it's almost like a mini grant proposal. And you see the question, a bit of the methodology and how they get there. And so that tells you the thinking of the researcher, how they're thinking. Obviously, bibliometrics, the background material, papers, grants, patents, collaborators are listed in there. And I think another important component is operational things, meaning how many full-time people or how many people are on staff? How big is the budget? Are there students? What kind of equipment? And the thing is that if you look at it in context, one researcher may have, let's say, all the equipment in the world and many, many students. And of course, their output and their achievements are going to be much greater. But if somebody has very limited resources and one student, they may just be brilliant. And in this case, that gets highlighted. And then you say, well, this one has limited resources, but their ideas are fantastic. They probably should be supported more. And so this is part of the thinking in this. And then we have an on-site visit where they visit the lab or the office. The lead researcher gives a presentation, a short talk, 15 minutes, and there's question and answer. And I think question and answer is part of give and take. It's not just evaluators asking questions. It's also the researcher asking questions and asking for clarification and also saying, look, I would like to do this, but this is something that's a struggle for me. I need help with this. And that's important because, as I said, they're your advocates, they're your peers. They can put this in the report as a suggestion. Then what we do is we actually have the lead researcher leave the room, and then the evaluators interact with the students and staff. And this is where they see whether the students are productive. They will ask a question like, how many are writing a paper, or you have regular lab meetings and so forth. And this gets an understanding. This gets an understanding of the of what's going on. How is it being managed? Is it optimized? Now, I'll just say that the evaluation, the on-site visit, is not just official; it's also social. Meaning that this is an opportunity to have lunch with the evaluators, to celebrate, to have a drink, and so forth. It's meant to be, let's say, fun in this sense, but there's some seriousness to it. And what we think about in this is that it should be respectful, obviously professional, but it's also celebratory because it's going to show after time improvement, and it's a time to really celebrate. So this is at least how we see it. And then there's a final report produced, and the final report usually gives the positive achievements that's there, but also gives recommendations for improvement. And I think in this case, there's also a round of clarification. So some of the researchers may not be happy with some aspect of the report, and so there's a moment of feedback. So the researcher can say, I disagree, or I think this is not correct. And so there's a sort of a correcting mechanism before it gets to a final report. And in our case, we took grades, A1, A2, A3, B, C, D, for the evaluation. And so the evaluation is really a time also for the researcher to make suggestions on how to improve the research environment and the institute where they're embedded. How will you, what do you think? Because only you know how this could be improved. So with that, this is my final slide, at least on this, and then I'll get to your questions. I'd like to go back to this golden circle, which is asking the why question. What is the purpose or mission of the research in a big sort of scientific or research question way? Is an important starting point. From there, when the question that you might ask is of a certain, let's say, level and encompasses let's say many different fields or many different actors, different problems, then the how of this, the strategy that you pursue this, whether I really need a statistician and I need a botanist, on my team, or I need to collaborate with them, or I need to bring them for a visit, or I need to go there and visit. That's part of the strategy to answering that question. And then the details of the what is actually doing the experimental design or the survey, case studies, prototypes, whatever it is that is actually the activity of the research itself. And so I'll leave you with this: the evaluation is a process that can help you achieve your goals and help direct you to answer important scientific questions. So I'll end with that, and I will. I think what we'll do is I'll go through the questions in the chat box, and then I would like to open the floor to what you think would be important to help you in your evaluation.
Marcus,
yeah.
Yeah, I think the way we set it, the webinar is that it's not an open mic because of the platform.
Yeah,
That way we control better the noise. Let me see. So I suggest that you first address some of the
yeah,
questions that were
yeah.
raised. There might be some questions that are directed more towards Tennessee that
That's
probably
okay.
I can
Yeah.
step in. But I lost. I was bumped out of the presentation for a while, and I lost the chat. So the older questions you probably can see them, but I can't.
Yeah, I'll go through the questions one by one.
All
Okay.
right.
So we'll
Okay.
do it
Go
like
ahead.
that.
Go
Okay.
ahead. Mhm.
So let's see. Let's go to the earlier ones. All right. Um, okay. So Claudia, uh, I would like to know, according to your opinion, how ambitious should you be with scarce resources? Do you have some idea? Yeah. Okay. So I think you should be ambitious because with the question itself. Um, and the thing is that if your question is a good question, you can be resourceful in the sense that you can find collaborators elsewhere, which costs not too much money. It used to cost just travel money and a little bit of this. But I think the other thing is that if you're asking a really good question and you are starting to show success, meaning let's say you have a key collaborator in a great place and you publish a lovely paper, it's going to be very difficult to not build on your success, I would say, because you've published a great paper, you've got a good collaboration, you have a great idea, it didn't cost that much money, but then you should be ready for a nice grant proposal. Now, the question is whether there's resources are scarce in your country. You should push them, to fund it if it's a really good question. But if it's a big enough question, that you should be applying for funding in other countries, the US, Europe, wherever. But I think don't let the idea of having or complaining, I'll say it like this, because every country they complain about resources, but don't have that stop you. That's not the barrier. You should think as big as you can and try to make that happen. But you have to be conscious that in the beginning the resources aren't there, but there are a lot of resources in the world. And some of these grants are available for anyone in any country. And you got to get started on that. So Claudia, I hope that answers the question. I answered a question about what I think about the ranking system, which I have mixed views on it. Let me go up. Jose Young, what's the real expectation in doing research for those with 50% of the time teaching and 30% of the time administrative work? Yes, great question. So yeah, you're teaching a lot and you're doing a lot of administration and you don't have a great deal of time to do research. It's not a good situation. It's you want to have people that dedicate as much time as possible to the research. Obviously, administration takes time, teaching takes time. Also, teaching brings something too. Teaching allows you to interact with students, and those students, some of them will join your lab, or some of them be interested in your research. But I think your 20% time is on the low side, because if you're really dedicated to research, you want to spend more time doing it. One of the things that we know, and I both in the Czech Republic, and I did some evaluations in other countries where the students had funding for the first few years, and then after those first few years, PhD students, after that, they didn't have funding from the state anymore, and they had to take part-time jobs. And what that happened is their productivity went down, and a lot of them dropped out. So I think let's say for Panama, for those who are serious about research and are good at it, they should be able to dedicate more time to research. I think 20% is not enough.
Yeah.
Definitely higher.
Yeah.
Because it's actually what we saw is that it's a real. It doesn't lead to good efficiency, even on the macro scale. The efficiency of the research output, if the researcher is split in their thinking. I mean, we know if you're all consumed in the research, then you want to get to your laboratory or office as soon as possible and do the work. And obviously there's other things we need to do in life, but having enough time is important. Let's see. Senaseed, one of the reasons for disqualifying projects are, this is Gerald. For disqualifying projects are for being too ambitious. Do you not consider this counterproductive? So, no, I don't think it's too ambitious, but I think for a grant proposal, it has to be realistic. So what I'll say is your question may be very big, and your question may take 10 years to answer, but every paper or project is one small part
self-contained
of the big question. And it could be a stepping stone to the different parts. And so I think if you framed your big ambitious question here and say, I need to understand this step first, and I'm writing a grant for, I don't know how long the grants are, 3 years or 2 years. So I'm writing a grant for 2 years, and this is what I can achieve in 2 years, realistically, to get me on the road to answering the big question. And then once I have this, I will go to the next step, write another grant on this. And so I think it's about also compartmentalizing the complexity of the question itself. Yeah. Now, Omar, I don't know if that's
Can I step in? Yeah.
Please.
I cannot answer that particular questions as I don't run the office of grants. But basically what I have seen in my experience is that, we will have to go, Gerald, we will have to go into detail of that particular proposal that you put in. But what we have seen is that sometimes researchers overshoot in terms of what they really want to achieve and what the realistic possibility of achieving that goal is. So there needs to be a balance in the proposal about, you state your overall or your overarching question, and then what is the particular question that you addressing within that scope of your research. And sometimes what you see is that there is a disproportional in terms of what you're going to execute, what you're going to do, and the budget that you are allowed to do it. So, but I cannot say more than that, as I don't know this particular project. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, for a grant proposal, it has to be, obviously, if there's an allocation of a certain amount of money, it has to be realistic that you can achieve what's achievable with that particular budget. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm saying you have to be ambitious in your question, but rarely are grants so big that you can answer a big question of a 10-year scale question. I mean, there's not many grants like that out there anywhere. But it's a stepping stone. I mean, these grants are seen as stepping stones. And even for, let's say, in our study, all of our researchers they tried to get multiple funding sources to address different aspects of their research, to fill in the gaps. That's how it is. Okay, so Claudia, she asks a question: application to solve problems in our society. Maybe give an example where the measure of the impact of the research. All right, so right, there's a lot of issues in society. I'll just take plastics, for instance. Plastic is a big concern. The bioeconomy is something that's quite it's quite hot right now in Europe, and I think in Latin America it's important. Can you find some kind of a engineering solution for plastics? Maybe something that's readily degradable, that society could use. On the social science side, maybe there's an issue with that needs to be addressed in I don't know, let's say indigenous populations and how their lifeways are impacting, let's say, their movement from, let's say, or their ability to get education, for example. So your research could be addressing that particular niche. Now, you may say, well, okay, that's very locally focused, but you might say, well, for a lot of, let's say, indigenous communities in other countries, and they're in many, many parts of the world, would your solution for their educational development, or let's say, opportunities for them to be more, let's say, happy or prosperous, can it be solved also in other contexts? Is it applicable? And so the comparing and the contrasting between Panamanian community and, let's say, Canadian or Indonesian and so forth, is that similar or different? And I think by asking that question that would be local, it can apply to a much bigger question, and then it opens a bigger audience as well. Same with the plastics question, replacement of plastics with ample, biological material that's being discarded is a great solution for society and the environment. So I hope that addresses that question, Umar. Advising is a kind of informal evaluation, correct? Elida, yeah, that's a tough question. I don't see advising as an evaluation. I think advising is basically helping you. It's also helping you achieve your goals in this sense. But I think advising should go without judgment. Evaluation, there's some grades and some judgment. Advising is more along the lines of steering, but should be devoid or remove a bit of the judgment. Because advising, you can give a number of different suggestions, and the person can take it or not take it, and it's not that formalized in that sense. So,
like raising a kid.
Well, except the power. Omar. Except the power balance. The parent has the power. So there's a power asymmetry there. Okay, the parent has power over it. An advisor doesn't have the power over the researchers. Basically, talking to somebody that has a different perspective, and they give you a different look at things. So I see it a little bit different in that sense. So I don't know if I hope I answered that question. Okay, Gerard, we have one institute, that's the Indicasat, where the evaluation goes against what the external evaluators say. Okay, thank you, Gerard, for making that public. How would you force these institutes to change their ways? So this is a question in a way for Cenacid. Is Cenacid see the evaluation?
I don't know the details about.
Okay.
But what I understand is that institutes, or in this case, the AIPs or asociaciones de interés públicos, they must execute sort of they need to establish sort of the procedures, and the Cenacid administration will oversee those sort of procedures, and the Junta Directiva, or the steering committee, needs to see those things.
Yeah.
So there's a follow-up that Cenacid needs to do about those procedures and how those procedures.
Yeah, I think I think it's important to say that
the evaluation.
I think it's important to say that, right? In a public forum. I think it's good. I mean, it's hard to judge whether it's true or not. It's one person's your view, your opinion on this, but in a way there should be oversight to see that there's implementation of the recommendations from the funding agency, probably Cenacid or one of the other agencies, to do a little bit of make sure this is happening, and also I think just like Gerard is giving feedback in this. I think there could be a mechanism for the researchers to give an anonymous feedback so that they don't get punished in a sense.
That's right.
Of this, so that there could be follow-up.
But my question to you, Marcos, is how sort of an evaluation will also oversee this type of issues? Is that something that you think evaluations can bring positive in order to make sure that there's different situations that evaluations, international evaluations for a third party, in this case, the National Research System, can bring to this? What do you think?
Yeah, I think so, because if you didn't have evaluations, Gerard wouldn't even be bringing this topic up, and so I think you have recommendations, and obviously there's, there's usually, I'll just say this, there's usually tension between administrations, and in countries that I've been in, there's tension between the administrations and the researchers, and that's something that it's not, let's say, it's not a good thing, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, no, and I mean it, because it depends on which ones of these, let's say, parties want the change. Maybe the administration wants to change and the researchers don't want it, or the researchers want to change and the administrators are not supportive of it. But I think the idea of having a mechanism to allow that dialogue, and there has to be incentives too, in a way. I mean, in a way, the funding agency, the policies that are set at a national level, set the rules in a way to steer the science in that particular direction. And I think these international reviewers, evaluators, and so forth, they're independent. They're there as another voice to suggest ways of going forward. But obviously, the implementation has to be between the administration and the researchers. But the funding agency and the ones that set the policies have the oversight. Now, I mean, there could be an audit, to see if it's being fulfilled, and if it's not being fulfilled, then there's penalties or rewards. That's a mechanism to do that. Like, I don't like the idea of necessarily the negative side, the punishing, but the idea of getting a reward leaves it positive, and those that don't get a reward, it's recognized why. It also shows the right way.
Yeah.
So those are the behaving well is rewarded, or behaving in the right way are rewarded, and so that's a way of maybe bringing this forward. But I think one of the things that's important is that the evaluations are done in such a way that all of the key stakeholders are really involved in this dialogue and shaping this to the goals that they agree upon, where they want to go, and if they agree, and then the process is done in a transparent way, and there's follow-up, that's ideal. And I say ideal because it doesn't always work that way, but at least you're improving. You're going to get improvement. All right. How broad are your fields? I have this question from Alida. Now, I don't know in what context, maybe Alida can follow up, in what context you're asking this. How broad are your fields? Is it me, or is it, I don't know what you're referring to. Do you pay the evaluators? Yeah. So yes. So we pay the evaluators for their time. And
there are fixed rates for this, I think, internationally.
Yeah, I mean, we paid them the fixed European rate, and so we would have them come. I think all of our evaluators were within Europe, and so we would pay them the daily per diem for 2 days.
That's right.
And then meal, hotel, and travel is covered.
Yeah.
And the evaluators, they came. The evaluations we had every 2 years, and then so in the beginning every two years, and then 4 years, and that's where we brought 21 of them, to really cover the subjects. But normally we have an advisory board, which are 7 members, and they come every year. And we also, that's not as costly as having 21 people come, but it's 7 people come, and they come every year, and they spend 2 days with us. And we cover their per diem cost per day, and then the travel and the hotel and so forth. So, and Gerard, okay. Integral part of evaluation should be grant proposals, and not only local but international. Yes, indeed. Yeah. Maybe I'll for Gerard's question, I'm going to go to the next. I'll touch on this in a second, but I'll show you some slide that might be interesting. So this is the interactive slide for Panama. These are the collaborators. This is based on co-publication. Omar? Yeah. So this is what countries Panama is interacting with. So you can see, of course, Panamanians are interacting with Panamanians, and then the U.S. is the next one with the most collaborations, and then you see, Brazil, Spain, Mexico, Colombia, and then several others. So this is a great display of the types of collaborations, and we'll see the nodes will grow in the future. So getting to Gerard's question. Grant proposals, yeah, international. So in the evaluation that we had, this would be the overall assessment of the research group. And so in this, as I mentioned, there would be grades administered, A1, A2, A3, B, C, D. And we actually had the evaluation committee look at the specific lines on this. So publication strategy and level of publication, grant strategy, writing, submission, alignment with the needs of the research program. So yeah, the idea is international grants, local grants, whatnot. But I will say that the local grants are very important, because every country that I've interacted with, the local grants or the local funding is usually the biggest part of any institute's funding. And then the international money is supplemental. So you can't discount the importance of the national funding source, but obviously the international grants have more prestige. They allow collaborators to come in. It's nice in this sense. So we also look at collaborations. In our case, we're a little more emphasizing the application sphere or business, but also, societal interactions, NGOs, policymakers. Are you collaborating, cooperating, and focusing on interdisciplinarity? This was something that we were focused on, going outside of your discipline and focusing on that. So how good are their research groups? The research potential and vision. So maybe you don't have a lot of great achievements, or the 5 achievements aren't as good as the senior members, but you might have a fantastic vision and a great strategy to get there. We look at the composition of the group, the human resources, the management of the group, the personnel. Are the students being productive? Then also comments on measures adopted in response to previous evaluations. So as we go on with the years, we see if they're responding, to what was recommended in the past. Now, getting to, I think this is Gerard's, maybe a little bit more on Gerard's. We actually have a written description of what an A group is, a B group is, a C group, and a D group. And I think that's really important in the beginning to identify what it is. And this is also aligns with what goals you would like to achieve. And so for us, and this is, I'm not saying this is how it's done. This is just how we do it. You can do it another way. But I think it's important to upfront say, this is what we identify as an A group or a B group. And so for us, I know the writing is quite small, but an A group is a well-established worldwide competitive research group with high international recognition and ambition that can bring results at the highest quality measures by international standards. So it's a very broad definition, but below that, we look at the sort of the details of what that really means. Are they trying to solve a large, complex problem? Is there a lot of primary authorships in important papers? Do they have awards, well-established networks of collaborators, et cetera, et cetera? Then a B group would be described as, very competitive at a national level and stay also competitive on an international, but do not belong to a worldwide competitive group. And so it goes down this. And so I think it's important to sort of state what it is, but I'll just say from the beginning, we didn't have a lot of A groups. We had A groups later. So, and that's good, because if you start at A1, there's nowhere to go after that. But I think the thing is to set it such a way that you can see where you could get to. And obviously, I think the idea is that, you know, when you get better and you get a, let's say, a higher score, or you get better at this, I mean, there should be, let's say, recognition and rewards for this. The other thing that we do is also we evaluate at the institution level. And so this, in a way, you know, for us, it was, you know, the quality of the researchers, and, you know, the potential and so forth. But I think it depends on really what the challenges are. I mean, if you, you know, if there's an administration that's supporting, you might ask, is the administration sufficiently supporting the researchers so that they can be successful? You know, and there can be an assessment and recommendations there too. So I think the evaluators should look at the whole system in essence. And so getting to, so I think, Gerard, I hope I answered your question. Elida, do you have an office of grant proposal? Definitely. We, at least at SATEC, we had a pre-award grant office. And so the way this worked is that we actually trained people in the beginning. So when I got there, we had people sent to other places. So we had them sent to really good institutions in Europe, so in Switzerland and in Belgium, and had them spend time there to learn how to be a good grant writer, to learn about all the grant opportunities in our neighborhood in Europe. And then this person, these people were incentivized that if they got good grants, you know, for the researchers, they would also get rewarded, right? And so it was a motivating system in that sense, but they focused only on the pre-award part. Now, the post-award is really more of a project management, finance management, budget management, operations management. It's really a different profile of a person. The pre-award person is a good writer in whatever language the grant application would be, but is also somebody that can connect the dots between the researcher and the proposal that's out there. It's somebody that's seeking a lot and is very interactive. So I think it's a very different type of personality type that you look for. But those people are definitely worth it to train them, to secure them, because they will make the researcher's life easier and they will bring in grant money. And so I would say that, you know, in the beginning for us, you know, so I was, let's say in the Czech Republic in the beginning, there was a lot of reluctance to all of these changes, all this improvement. And I had to fight to keep these grant people there. I had to fight for 2 years before we got our big over €1 million grant. But the board they were killing me. They wanted me to get rid of these people. And I said, no, this is going to work. And it works. And so the answer is yes, definitely. I think it's important. Let's see now. Are we answering all the questions? Gerard. Okay, sometimes you have to dumb it down for Cenacid grants. Okay, to take the ambitious part out. Still do the ambitious part, but do not include it in the grant. I don't know what to comment on that. I think there's, I'll just put it this way. So sometimes when we know something, let's say we're very specialized in our particular area, we have a language that we speak that only specialists could understand. And I'll give you an example. So I was last year, 2 years ago, I was introduced to a project which combined both life scientists and social scientists. And what I found was they asked me to join in almost like a mediator to try to get the two of them to speak the same language to produce a paper. And what I realized is that when talking about them, they had very different ideas of things. And I think what's important is that, you know, the dumbing down is maybe one aspect to this, but I think it's finding a common ground. So I'll say it like that, finding a common ground. But the other thing is that for grant applications, I don't know who reviews the grant applications, but, you know, it should be peers that are specialized in the field, you know, that review that, so that you obviously can find the best grant proposal. And so I don't know what field you're in, Gerard, and I don't know what the evaluation is, but I think that's something that I would recommend, is also to get peers that don't have a conflict of interest. So that means not in Panama. to review the grants.
Yeah, all the evaluators are external, or most of them are external. And Gerald works with cancer research.
Okay.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of cancer researchers in the world. So yeah. But anyway, those are my thoughts on that. Sorry, I can't answer the details of this, but that's how I see that. And okay, so I see some answers here. Jose, each institute must develop specific policies to implement research group. What is your recommendation for universities? Okay, so yeah, that's a very broad question. I think some of the policies that are very common, and maybe, I think one of the most important ones that I found was human resources. And what I mean by that is how you recruit people, how you keep people, how you motivate people, how you promote people, and also, if there has to be an exit, that it's sensible, that it's respectful. And so I think the HR policy is important. Number one, financial distribution policy is also very important. It should be written in a way, there should be clear criteria and transparent. I think that's very important. Publication policy is important. I think one of the things unfortunately, is you need a publication ethics policy, plagiarism, stealing, and so forth. But also for the university, the interaction of the researchers with companies in the outside world should be encouraged, but it should also be to the point where the university supports it, but not necessarily that the researcher is using the university's resources for their own business, for example. So I think there should be some guidelines and policies on, even if you're filing a patent. So I think that's one aspect of that external, not collaboration, but let's say interaction with the application sphere is an important policy. And if you have equipment, common equipment, common facilities, facilities policy of use, whether you want it to be, open access and whatnot. Now, Omar asked me to maybe touch on open science. This is another trend, and I think in particular, the ability to read the literature in a, let's say, a free way or an open cost way or a reduced cost, but I think you need access to knowledge. And so I think institutions need to address that, and also encourage you to open your, let's say, your communication and dissemination with the world. So these are just a handful of different things. There's a number of policies I think that they can do, but it should be geared so that it's fair, it's transparent, everybody understands it, but it also helps to improve and motivate. It should be positive, at least in my view. It should be very positive in this sense. Okay, Jose, I hope I answered that. Very broad question. Transparency is key, Gerald. Yeah, is that a question? I think it's key. Yeah, it's very important. Claudia, you run an institute confirmed with several universities, right? Yes, I used to, yes. So 6 entities. How is the evaluation process in those universities? Is it similar, or is it in some standardized way? So the universities that I was interacting with did not have as the same type of evaluation. Some of them didn't have any. Some of them did, but they didn't go into this sort of level of detail as we did. Some of them were very bibliometric, so they just looked at outputs, so it wasn't as intensive. So is there a standard? There isn't. And I don't think there should be a standard, but what I think is that you will achieve your goals, and it depends on what you look at. And so if you look at certain things and you have certain things, written down or evaluated or looked at or emphasized, that's where you're going to improve. And the ones that are not, if you don't have an evaluation, then no, maybe there won't be improvement. Maybe there will. But I think it comes down to what you really look at. Now, as there's no standard overall, I was trying to emphasize that it will be up to you as researchers and Cenacede and the Panamanian research community to figure out, how they want to improve, what they want to do, what they want to achieve, and that will determine how the evaluation will go, or at least how I would like to see that, in essence. But there's no standard. You talk about the evaluation by field. Yes, Alida, thank you for the question. Yeah. So when I look at all the, I looked at the list of researchers that answered the survey, and there's people in all sorts of fields: ecology, robotics, marine science, historians, people studying democracy, all sorts of fields. And so, yeah, in a way, I can't imagine, a history scholar evaluating the robotics researcher. I just can't imagine it.
Yeah.
So because they have to be, I think they would be the ones that can address the fields. Now, everybody has let's say a subspecialty, and this comes into play, is that you have to get the evaluators that will cover the field sufficiently so they have sufficient information. Now, the way we did it was that we, in fact, had the researchers suggest a list of evaluators, meaning we gave the criteria. We said, no, nobody from in the country, nobody that you're collaborating with, the different criteria. But said, give us a list of the names. Who do you think would be a good evaluator? And then we looked at the list of evaluators that were put forward, and then started contacting them and selected the ones. And so in the end, we in fact had the researchers pick the evaluators to evaluate them. And so I think it's very difficult for somebody outside of your field to know who would be a good evaluator. But I think you know who are the respected peers. But I will say, you want to get somebody that's, depending on how your evaluation is, you want them to show up. You want them to be obviously good at what they do, but you don't need a Nobel laureate. You need somebody that's a solid scientist, that's going to be there, that's going to dedicate time and give you good advice. I think that's what you're really looking for. Okay, Gerard, you submitted in 2018 2 Horizon grants in 2 different international consortium. We didn't get them. Needed 10 points to qualify. We got 9, but we learned a lot. Okay, I think that's great. So
that's the way to go.
Yeah, I think so, because now you've built up a network of international, let's say, consortium. And the other thing is you. The thing with Horizon and now Horizon 2020, now Horizon Europe, is that if you're existing, let's say, if you've submitted a proposal before, this is also looked at as good because, and with this consortium, with this group of researchers, because you should continue working with them in different ways, collaborating, but you have a better chance of getting a nicer score coming up. Usually in these grants, you don't get it on the first try.
Yeah.
But the fact that you have a working consortium with a number of these different players, in particular the European framework, you usually need 3 different countries, and sometimes a little bit complex. But having those collaborators, those colleagues there is good. And one of the things is that in addition to, let's say you didn't get the grant, but now with online workshops and stuff, organize a workshop, together on a particular topic, or a conference or something like that, because you can put it in your grant as a documentation that you're actually working together. Or when you're co-authors of publications, that goes in the grant as well. And they see that you're actually really working. So if you just randomly put a group of countries together that aren't working together, those usually aren't successful. But if you have a track record of being, even though you didn't get a grant yet, but you're working together, you've been documented, that's starting to look really good. So I would support, foster that engagement in any way you can.
And that's the way, that's the kind of evidence that we as the SNI, we will be looking in the future for documenting and supporting evidence that people are working together, that they're forming international groups, that they are, applying for international funds. That's sort of the information that we want to see.
Mm-hmm. So before I go through all the questions, I want to ask my other question again to the members out there. What do you think is needed or missing to achieve your goals? Meaning, if there was some kind of a workshop provided, or something that would be necessary for you to be better at doing your research, what is it? Is it helping you frame the big question? Is it how do you get more collaborators? Let me know. Put it in here. Let's hear what it is, because I think we want to know exactly what the needs are of the researchers for this.
Yeah. So basically, what we want is you guys to express, sort of, in your opinion, what will be sort of strategic topics that you probably will need to have support, so that we might have sort of an interactive workshop or seminar, to address some of those needs. So
Yes,
to go
put it in.
so basically it's like to go beyond a lecture in which only we receive most of the information in one direction. We have sort of a two-way communication, and sort of more of a brainstorm type of activity. It might be different topics, of course. Like, for example, what are the strategic steps, or how do you build a collaboration? How do you start forward an international collaboration? Those could be a strategic thing. The other thing is, how do I make, for example, my institution trustworthy in order to receive international funds? That could be another strategic type of things that we can address, because in order to receive international funds, you need to have sort of a track record of how do you manage funds, or what would be, or how do you implement them. I mean, usually in every country there is international agencies that might be able to manage funds, like, for example, PNUD. And so that, do you have a convenio, a memorandum of understanding with that institution, so that you can receive funds internationally? Something like this. I mean, is that also, do you agree, Marcus, that this is the kind of things that?
Yeah, I think so too. The other thing besides that sort of came to mind is English writing. Many people can read and so forth, but even when I first got to Czech Republic, English wasn't the strongest. It's how it is, but English wasn't that strong per se for some of the researchers and particular students, and I think that can be supplemented. So providing English editorial services, or we even provided workshops for students on writing and so forth, but somehow supplement that in a way, because the issue is that right now a lot of the journals are in English, and I was just joking earlier that, but in 30 years they're all going to be in Chinese, so we'll have to switch languages. But but yeah, I mean, somehow you have to overcome, if that's a barrier, you have to try to figure out how to overcome that, so that people can get into those journals too.
Marcus, Dr. Rao has a comment there about Carnegie Foundation ranking of research institutions.
Yes.
Do you...
So okay, I see. So okay, that's Rao. He's on. Okay. So we should adopt Carnegie Foundation ranking of research-based institutes as tier 1, 2, 3, and then this gives an approach to build competitive, diverse-based international collaborations, local problem-solving ability. So I'm not sure what the I'm not sure how that's formulated, but it okay. So it's formulated in tiers. I think that it's more of a comment, I guess, whether
Yeah.
Panama would adapt that or not. I think that there's probably some details in there that's important.
Yeah.
I think it's something for the research
We need,
community to see if that's good way to go or not.
yeah.
It's hard for me to judge.
Yeah, it's the exercise of CENACID and the National Research System. We need to look forward to implement an evaluation program that contextualize the local realm or the local context in order to advance. I mean, we recognize that we have limitations, and you have to recognize those limitations. But also, you need to aspire. You need to set a target in where you want to go. Mm-hmm. And what we are looking, and I'm going to be very open about this, what we are looking is that we need to improve our ecosystem of research. We set a goal when the National Research System was set in 2008, that was to improve the quality and the number of researchers in the country. I think we are achieving that goal slowly but surely. We are producing more research of high quality with impact. So we are addressing that issue, but collectively, our institutions required to be strengthened. And in order to be strengthened, we need to have a very holistic evaluation so that they adjust at different levels in order to provide a much better environment for research, and then to really potentiate their researchers to a next level. That's our vision.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we have another comment or question here. Oriana, yeah, thank you for your talk. Yeah, thank you. I agree with your perspective and recommendations. One of the main problems in Panama could be the lack of time for research activities. What would you propose to convince the authorities to provide the researchers more time? As I mentioned before, I did an evaluation in Estonia, and this was also a problem there, mainly for researchers and students. They basically were not given enough money after a certain period of time to be fully employed doing research. And so the issue for, I think, is really the allowance of them to be fully dedicated to research. Obviously, it's never 100%. Usually there's a little administration and teaching and so forth, but it's about how finances are allocated. So now in universities, a lot of the sort of the challenges with universities worldwide is that they're funding on an education based or teaching based model, and that model is either quarter, semester, or annual in financing. And teaching a class is, I mean, it takes a couple hours, depends on the class, but it takes a couple hours a couple times a week, and it's a very different activity than research. But their budgets are typically aligned such that they, let's say, pay per class, or I'm not sure how the structure is in Panama, but they pay per class, and it's usually very short-term increments. Research financing should never be a semester or annual financing. You can't get anything done in a year. You can't hire somebody to write a paper and produce a good paper in a year. It's usually a couple years. So you'd have to switch if the universities are doing research, or they have the HR policy that oversees the financial distribution of personnel. It would need to be adjusted to be realistic for high performance or higher performing research, and that's multi-annual and more time for research. Now, if the universities cannot do that, or they don't want to do research, then the research institutes should follow a model that's multi-annual financing and promoting, promoting on, improvement and success over time with enough dedication to this. So the evaluation in Estonia we as the evaluation board, we recommended that you give them money for not as a grant, but as a salary, if that's how they're being paid, to conduct research, or just, have less researchers. But to have many researchers that are really, really small part-time is not effective. It's probably better to have fewer researchers that are really, let's say, 60, 70, 80% fully dedicated to research than having hundreds that are doing 20%. That's just not it's not effective. So that's my view on that. But anyway, a board, like when we were in Estonia, we recommended that. So as an external, we said, this is what you need. You asked us to give a recommendation, and this is what we gave, because they had incredible dropout rates for students. It was 50% of the PhD students dropped out. It was incredible. It was an incredible waste of resources on the long run for the country. My question, so Elida, my question really is, how do you group your researchers? You can not have 3 evaluators for every research group you have in an institute. How broad do your groups and your research groups for the evaluation? Do you have groups themselves to collaborate? Okay, so this is really the structure. So for instance, for a particular subject matter, we would have anywhere, well, let's say about 10 groups. And so if you look at a particular field and you imagine a field of study, let's just take, I don't know, let's take something that I'm maybe familiar with. So genetics. So you may have 10, let's say 10 groups in there in genetics, and they may have different model systems that they're working on, whether they're working on worms or or flies or mice, whatnot. But they may be asking questions that are related but not competing. And so there may be somebody working on cancer genetics. There may be somebody working on developmental genetics, somebody working on some organ development, maybe epigenetics, maybe some statistical modeling, maybe evolutionary aspects of genetics. But what you can see is that you can have 3 evaluators cover that broad swath of that topic. But the other thing you see with me highlighting that is that there would be enough of a, let's say, critical mass that you could imagine that many of the researchers would be collaborating, the research groups would be collaborating with each other, even though they have their own subdomain. And that's where it allows for real enhancement. If you have, let's say, a group that is working alone, they have to really be active at seeking collaboration. It's not ideal that they're right next door to each other, but they have to actively seek those kinds of collaborations. And the group size, I looked at the group size in Panama. I think a lot of them are, a good size. But some of them, if they're too small, meaning, 2 or 3 people is maybe a little on the small side. And I think particularly if they're not as heavily invested, so if they're not up to 60% of their time invested, then I think it's below critical mass. It's not going to be as effective as having a group of 6, 7, 8 people that are all 60, 70, 80% of their time working on a topic. And that's within the group itself. But anyway, to answer the question, 3 evaluators for, a particular topic. So they would cover many groups, 8, 10, 12 groups is not unreasonable. Okay. All right. Any more questions? Ariana, how to convince the authorities of universities and other entities to value research and innovation better? A topic for a workshop. Okay. Yeah. Omar, you hear that? Omar, that's a suggestion. Even though my university, so Alida, even though my university is not ranked as a research institute, I find that many tier 1 universities are willing to collaborate with us. Must be the coffee. Yeah. People are interested. People want to learn new things. I think scientists can be very social. Researchers are very social. They want to learn about new things, open up new areas, and I think it's not a hard sell. to collaborate with researchers in Panama.
Marcus,
you have a beautiful place, yeah.
You wanted me to answer or address something?
No, this was just a comment from Oriana, which was that convincing the authorities of the university or other entities to value research or innovation. A workshop topic.
Very good.
Yeah.
Excellent.
That's a good topic. It's a
Great.
It's a strategic topic that we have to.
Yeah.
But the best thing is to have the authorities listen to this sort of to this sort of strategic webinars in order to have or broaden their view. And the most challenging one is to linking research to their educational offer. Universities are oriented in Panama to their academic offer. So we need, as researchers, we need to convince them that is research what provides not only a better visibility internationally, but also offers students a way to learn in a different way that it's more that is very impactful. So
exactly, to think critically, which is important for the society.
That's right.
It's very important. I think also the stories that the researchers, the discoveries and what they find, those are great stories for promoting the university, even in the local media.
Yeah, I think we are seeing some effects of that recently. Yeah. I think across all different universities. I will say that for the good or the bad of the ranking system, we now are here, or authorities talking about the ranking.
Yep.
And that sets a seed for change. It sets a seed for having expectations, and so we need to move towards that. But it's a great idea that it could be a very good workshop.
One thing in the, let's say, you call them rectors, also the heads of the universities, rectors or chancellors.
Rectors, yeah.
Yeah. So for the rectors that I had on my board, I remember there was a moment when I went to my regular visit with them. I went to their office and I said, if I were rector and if my term was to be renewed or not, I guess the academic senate would vote me for another term or not, and I had only one slide to show. The slide I would show would be the ranking of the university the day I started and the ranking of the university today, to provoke them to get them to actually improve. And so by recognizing the ranking, although I'm not completely in favor of it, but I think it does motivate some individuals in this case, particularly rectors, if they don't think about this. Okay, so I have Claudia. The University of Panama established a collaboration with the University of Canada to provide seminars to professors about writing and articles in English. Very good. I believe is a good initiative to encourage researchers to open their options or visibility. A very good comment. I love this comment by Gerard. He said, excellent talk. I got 3 exclamation points. Thank you, Gerard. Love that. Yeah, and then we have comment in, whoops, can I go up? Yep. Mina, in German. So I learned a lot today, and it was very refreshing to see. Thank you very much. So this is a comment. This is all good. That comment is not very accurate. Unfortunately, my university only cares about, I'm not sure what Claudia is referring to here. The comment is not, that comment is very accurate. I'm sorry, I misread. That comment is very accurate. Unfortunately, some universities only care about accreditations, and one of the criteria is the amount of PhDs in their staff. The thing is, not all of them have full dedication to research. Yeah, I think so the question about the numbers of PhDs is one thing, but I think also if you ask in the evaluations to list the full-time equivalents or full-time dedication to research, you will see that the head count and the FTE count will show the evaluators exactly how much is dedicated to research.
Yeah.
And then once you have the FTE count, which is the real number of time, you look at what is actually being produced for that FTE count. And so when you compare that across different institutions or different research groups, you'll see that a lot of times if you have a bigger FTE count, or let's say they're not necessarily bigger FTE count, but more percentage-wise, they will have a bigger output overall. And I think that could be then used for an argument to push that towards a higher dedication. But I think just showing the numbers is not sufficient to actually get a full picture. It's the dedicated time with a number of people plus what they've managed to achieve.
All right. I think we're getting to the to the end of the webinar.
Okay.
I see some people leaving the room.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. If you want to contact me, you can contact me. I'd be happy to interact with you. Omar could send my email, or it's in the slides. So I'd be happy to. Yeah.
So just some final words, and besides giving you a big thank you, Marcus, for providing this visionary talk in order in which way we have to move. I would like to extend also my thanks to everybody that attended today. To be faithful, there were 23 at one moment. I think that was the maximum that we reached, even though we had 70 subscribe or registered. So thank you very much, and we will be sending the video of this talk to your emails. And some of them have requested to send the previous talk that Enrique Herrera also gave us. We will be moving into in April. In April, we will bring the Europe Commission of Euro Access with Victoria of seminars in the rest of the year as well. So stay touched, stay connected, and hope you can attend. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Enjoyed it.
Thanks.